My name is Everett Rawlins. I was a park ranger in 1980, and for most of my life I've avoided putting this story into words. Not because I forgot it, but because saying it out loud makes it feel closer, like the forest might remember me back. I'm telling it now because I'm old enough to know that silence doesn't protect anyone. It just passes the weight along. Back then I was assigned to a stretch of woodland that looked ordinary on paper. Marked trails, elevation lines neatly drawn, junctions labeled in pencil and ink. Nothing about it stood out on the maps we carried folded in our pockets or kept pinned to cork boards back at the ranger station. If anything, it was considered one of the easier sectors. Flat in places, well-established footpaths, good visibility. That's what made it dangerous. The first time something felt off, I didn't even register it as fear. It was more like irritation. I was halfway through a routine patrol, boots crunching over packed dirt, when I reached a trail junction that wasn't where it was supposed to be. The signpost was familiar. Same weathered wood, same carved arrows, but according to my map, I shouldn't have reached it for another quarter-mile. I assumed I'd miscounted my steps. That happens. Trees repeat themselves. Forests have a way of humbling your sense of direction if you let your guard down. I checked my compass. It was steady. I checked the map again, smoothing it against my knee. Everything lined up on paper. It was the ground that disagreed. I made a note in my logbook when I got back. Just a line, trail junction appears early, possible signage shift, no follow-up came from it. Over the next few weeks, the irritation turned into a pattern. Trails I'd walked a dozen times began to feel longer or shorter without reason. A bend that should have opened onto a creek instead revealed another stretch of trees. Landmarks stayed familiar, but their order didn't. It was like someone had taken the pieces of the forest and rearranged them just enough to make you doubt your memory. I tested myself, counted paces, marked trees with chalk, left ribbon ties where regulations allowed. The next day the markers were still there, but the path between them felt wrong. Curves where there should have been straightaways, inclines that hadn't existed before. I told myself the obvious explanations: erosion, seasonal growth, my own fatigue. Rangers are trained to exhaust the mundane before considering anything else. We're caretakers, not mystics. Still, I started carrying extra batteries for my flashlight, extra paper for notes. I found myself checking the radio more often, comforted by the static hiss that meant I was still connected to something outside the trees. Then came the first moment of real disorientation. I was following a marked loop trail, one designed to bring you back to your starting point without deviation. Halfway through, I stopped to check a fallen branch that had partially blocked the path. When I stepped back onto the trail, everything looked the same. And yet, after 10 minutes of walking, I realized I should have already been back at the ranger post. The forest wasn't dense enough to block sightlines. I could see far enough between trunks to know I hadn't wandered off. The trail was clear beneath my boots, packed and worn by years of foot traffic. I checked my map again, then my compass. Both insisted I was where I should be. The unease crept in quietly, a tightening in the chest, a sense that I was moving without progressing. When I finally reached the post, the sun was lower than it should have been. I logged the delay more carefully this time, used exact times, exact landmarks. I expected questions. None came. Other rangers began sharing small complaints. Nothing dramatic, just comments in passing. A trail feeling longer than usual, a turn they didn't remember making. One man joked that the forest was playing tricks. No one laughed for long. The radios started acting up around the same time, not full failures, just moments of dead air where there should have been signal. Calls repeating back half a second delayed, like echoes that didn't belong. The forest never did anything dramatic, no collapsing ground, no sudden storms. It simply refused to stay consistent. What scared me most wasn't getting lost. It was the growing sense that the forest knew exactly where I was, even when I didn't. And that it was adjusting itself accordingly. By late summer of 1980, the forest had stopped pretending to be subtle. It wasn't just me anymore. I could hear it in the way other rangers spoke, careful, clipped sentences that avoided specifics. No one said lost, no one said changed. We talked around the problem the same way you talk around a bad diagnosis before it's confirmed. One ranger, a man named Colton who'd worked that sector longer than I had, told me he'd walked the same spur trail 3 times in one morning and reached 3 different end points. He laughed when he said it, but his eyes didn't match the sound. He asked me if I thought the trail crews had been rerouting things without notice. I told him no, because I knew they hadn't. The logbooks started to tell their own story. I noticed it while cross-referencing patrol times, entries that should have lined up but didn't. Two rangers reporting the same trail at the same hour, describing different landmarks. A junction marked as inspected on a day when another report claimed it didn't exist. There were no accusations, just quiet inconsistencies piling up between the lines. I requested permission to do a full walkthrough with fresh markings. Survey tape, chalk, handwritten notes, old-school methods meant to anchor reality to paper. The request was approved faster than I expected, which should have been my first warning. That morning I entered the forest just after sunrise. The air was cool and still, the kind of calm that makes every sound feel amplified. I marked trees at regular intervals, double-knotted the tape so wind couldn't take it, and noted compass headings at every turn. For the first hour, everything behaved. Then I reached a familiar clearing and felt that same internal hesitation, like stepping onto a stair you thought was one step lower. The tape on the trees was still there, but the spacing between them felt compressed. I walked faster without meaning to, as if speed might keep the ground from adjusting beneath me. I checked the radio, static. Then my own voice came back half a second late, distorted and thin. That was when the forest began rearranging itself faster. A side trail appeared where there hadn't been one. Not freshly cut, old, worn, believable. I ignored it and stayed straight. 5 minutes later, I passed the same side trail again, this time on the opposite side of the path. I stopped walking. The silence pressed in immediately. No birds, no wind, just my own breathing, too loud, echoing off trunks that hadn't moved but somehow felt closer. I realized then that the forest wasn't confusing me accidentally. It was responding, adjusting paths the way a body shifts weight when someone steps too close. I backed up slowly, eyes on the tape markers. One of them was gone, not fallen, not torn, gone. I turned around and saw it tied neatly to a different tree 20 yards back, exactly where it would have been more useful if I'd entered from another direction. My hands shook as I wrote in the logbook. The paper felt thin, inadequate, as if words were no longer binding. When I finally made it out, hours later than planned, my supervisor barely glanced at my notes. He skimmed, nodded, and said we'd review routing accuracy. That night, a hiker was reported missing. Young man, day pack, signed in at a trailhead that technically no longer connected cleanly to any loop. We formed search teams at first light, spreading out with radios crackling and maps that no longer felt trustworthy. The forest did something different during the search. It simplified. Paths narrowed, junctions disappeared, everything funneled inward, guiding us away from the missing man instead of toward him. Radios failed in pockets, compasses spun just enough to make you doubt them. We never found him. The official report cited disorientation, exposure, likely fall off trail. The forest absorbed him the way it absorbed everything else, quietly, without resistance. After that, sections were closed temporarily. Signs went up. Access was restricted. The explanations were reasonable, which made them harder to argue against. But I knew the truth by then. The forest didn't trap people. It rearranged itself until people placed themselves exactly where they shouldn't be. I began dreaming about paths folding in on themselves, about walking forward and arriving behind myself. I'd wake with my heart racing, convinced the room had shifted while I slept. I asked for a transfer near the end of that year. No one asked why. They just moved my name on a board and let the forest keep its secrets. I left that forest in the winter of 1980, but it never really let go of me. Transfers are supposed to feel like relief, new routes, new terrain, different problems. Mine felt more like an amputation, necessary, clean on paper, but followed by a phantom ache that never went away. Even in parks hundreds of miles from that place, I found myself hesitating at trail junctions, double-checking landmarks I knew were correct. I stopped trusting paths. Years passed, I rose in rank. I trained younger rangers. I taught them how to read maps, how to respect terrain, how to recognize when panic, not danger, is the real enemy in the woods. I never told them about the forest that rearranged itself. Some knowledge doesn't educate, it infects. But every so often, I'd see it again. A trail map revised without explanation, a loop quietly downgraded to out and back, a missing hiker report that leaned too heavily on the word confused. Patterns repeat if you know how to look. I checked once. Curiosity is a dangerous habit for rangers, but age dulls caution. In the late 1990s, I requested updated public maps from my old district under the excuse of research. The forest was still there. Same boundaries, same elevation, but the trails were different, simplified, shortened, fewer loops, fewer decisions, as if someone had learned the minimum complexity required to keep people from noticing the shifts. That's when I understood the real design. The forest wasn't hostile, it wasn't malicious, it was selective. It reacted to movement, to intention, to confidence. Those who wandered aimlessly often found their way back. Those who pushed forward, who trusted maps and systems too deeply, were the ones who disappeared. The forest didn't need to chase them. It only needed to rearrange itself until the wrong step felt like the right one. I think about the missing hiker more than I should, about how his last known position made sense only if the trail had changed after he passed it, about how the search teams never realized the forest had already decided where we were allowed to go. I never returned after my transfer. Even when colleagues invited me back for reunions or retirement ceremonies, I declined. I made excuses about distance and health. The truth was simpler. I didn't trust myself not to walk in. Now I'm old, my knees ache on stairs. My balance isn't what it used to be. Sometimes when I walk at night, especially in unfamiliar places, I feel that old sensation, the world subtly misaligned, urging me to choose one direction over another. That's when I stop moving. Because I know better. I'm telling this now because the forest hasn't stopped. It's still there, quietly adjusting, still patient, still waiting for people who believe maps are promises and paths are fixed things. They aren't. If you ever find yourself walking a trail that feels too familiar, too accommodating, pay attention. If a junction appears sooner than it should, or a landmark feels out of order, don't push forward. Turn around. Some forests don't want you lost. They want you placed. And once you're where they want you, the path you came in on may no longer exist.